What if I told you the foundations of your entire reality are a hallucination? That the ground beneath your convictions is not solid, but spectral, a fog of habits pretending to be truth? Welcome, dear wanderers of perception. Today we begin our descent into Immediatism, Hakim Bey's incendiary blueprint for living in revolt, and we start at its most lethal nerve, the opening chapter, Ontological Anarchy in a Nutshell. It's not a thesis. It's not a manifesto. It's a poetic Molotov cocktail hurled into the banquet of history. Bey opens with a declaration that snaps like a bone. Since absolutely nothing can be predicated with any real certainty as to the true nature of things, all projects can only be founded on nothing. Read that again. Nothing, not God. Not reason. Not nature. Not even liberation. This isn't nihilism. This is weaponized uncertainty, a fertile chaos where new values are born, not from blueprints, but from desire. You, the reader, are not asked to agree. You are dared to create, to become the revolt against everything which proclaims the nature of things is such and such. In Bey's cosmology, there is no such thing as the way things are. There's only the ecstatic crime of making them up as you go. Why do you still bow to law? Is it some masochistic thirst in your DNA? Natural law, social law, divine law, Hakim Bey carves them into the same rotting carcass. You cling to laws because you cannot stand the smell of your own freedom. I see you fumbling for maps in a landscape that was meant to be explored blindfolded and screaming. The revolt Bey demands is not against one king, one government, one tyrant. It is against the very idea that things must be a certain way. The way you define yourself by I must and they say is a betrayal of the chaotic, molten possibility you could have been. You were born to break the rules written in the bones of the cosmos, and you kneel instead to their dead grammar. Tragic. Chaos is not your enemy. Chaos is your God. Not the chaos of nihilistic collapse you fearfully whisper about in coffee shops, but the primordial surplus of becoming, the sacred dance of Tiamat before Marduk's blade fell. Bey resurrects Hesiod's ancient chaos, the great living serpent, the riot of color, blood, protoplasm, the heat before the stars cooled into sterile bureaucrats of light. Chaos never died, he roars, and how stupid it is that you ever thought it did. Your order, your structures, are nothing but the plastic coffin you clutch around your own soul. Life is not orderly. Life is the fevered dream before history erected its first prison. The state is not awake. The state is not omnipotent. The state is a festering behemoth dreaming of order, and in its sleep, it sweats out laws, wars, religions like toxic pus. Hakim Bey invites you to tiptoe past the giant's snoring maw and live, to create within its shadow, to laugh and make love and plot in the cracks of its decaying teeth. He demands not revolution but uprising, moments of spontaneous refusal that explode and vanish before the cops can even put their pants on. Wake up, rebel as if you were a beautiful disease. Celebrate your day before the giant's dreams metastasize into new cages. Order is death, and you celebrate it every morning with your orderly schedules, your predictably tragic news feeds, your clock-punched prayers to the gods of scarcity. Bey tells you bluntly, civilization is the denial of desire. You could live in a kingdom of perpetual springtime, in a palace where all your passions flower into wild new forms. Instead, you inhabit a frozen graveyard of commodities, frozen dreams, frozen souls. You think capitalism feeds your wants? No, it manufactures your hunger and then feeds you ash. Passion, not order, is your birthright. Chaos, not economy, is your salvation. Even your sacred anarchism is a betrayal. Did you know that? Bey slaps your earnest manifestos out of your hands like a bully with a megaphone of sacred rage. Anarchism still kneels before a fantasy of natural law, of goodness in human nature. How pathetic. Ontological anarchy tears even that crutch from under you. No governance, no natural order. Only becoming, only chaos. You dream of utopia? Dream, instead of 1,000 tiny insurrections blooming and rotting in a garden without walls. Bey calls for no new flags, no new slogans, only burning the old in a festival of living negation. Scarcity is the god of the dead. Capitalism dances around it, pretending to be a god of abundance while sharpening its teeth on your exposed needs. Bey calls bullshit with an elegance that slices deeper than any manifesto. There is no scarcity, only theft. There is no poverty, only the rape of abundance by those who fear your freedom. Out of nothing, we could make a feast. Out of chaos, we could make a carnival. Instead, you line up to buy plastic fruit in a cemetery of malls. Burn it all. Make a quilt instead. Make a meal for strangers. Celebrate the terror of giving without price. Language is a virus. You swallowed it whole. Now it speaks through you. Bey warns you, the grammar you obey is the grammar of slavery. Hermes, trickster, angel, saboteur, tried to bring you a different language, a divine chaos tongue, but you chose the sterile syntax of law courts and shopping carts. What could it mean to speak in chaos again? To invent a tongue of wild generosity, of celebration without slogans. To mean something and everything at once. The medium is not the message. The medium is the prison. Break its bones. Self versus other is the biggest scam you ever fell for. Bey mocks your sacred boundaries, your clutched identities. There is no self. There is no other. Only a swirling, sticky web of relation, mutual becoming, resonance, attraction. Identity politics, nationalism, even humanism, all break apart in the raw light of chaotic inner being. You were never meant to stand alone. You were meant to dance with 1,000 others at once, to multiply yourself in a communal orgy of strange attraction. You fear losing yourself? Good. That fear is your ticket out of the cage. No governance is possible, and good riddance. Governance is a fossil dream, a brittle promise that crumbles when touched. Bey spits on it with gleeful contempt. Chaos cannot be ruled. Freedom cannot be governed. If your dream of freedom involves elections, committees, or contracts, you are still trapped. Only love governs, and love, my friend, is a cosmic drunkard, a riotous flood, not a lawyer. Forget blueprints. Forget ballots. Dance naked on the grave of democracy and shout your own name into the void. Freedom is not a noun. It is not an object to hoard. It is a movement, a practice, a muscle. Freedom is a psychokinetic skill, Bey sneers. It must be exercised, danced, risked. You do not possess freedom any more than you possess breathing. You must become it, moment to moment. If you wait for the revolution to deliver it to your doorstep, you are already dead. Walk out now, alone if you must, and live the uprising that no institution can contain. The Bedouin did not build marble palaces. They lived in skin tents that could vanish overnight. Bey lifts up this architecture of disappearance as the true temple of freedom. Like the nomad, like the pirate, like the commune, you must learn to exist where no map can find you. Build your life from skins, not stones. Drift without nostalgia. Celebrate the holy risk of existing without guarantees. Better to vanish in beauty than petrify into history's next bloody monument. Utopian politics are a coffin. Utopian poetics are a torch. Bey demands you imagine harder, not compromise more. The future is not a system to be built. It is a delirium to be embraced. Mirrors of utopia, flashes of paradise inside the rotting city, this is the only real progress. Poets, not politicians, will write the next Declaration of Independence, and it will smell like wet earth and burnt sugar, not old paper. Forget institutions. Forget movements. Hakim Bey points to the quilting bee, the feast, the erotic carnival, the union of egoists. Stirner, Nietzsche, Fourier, these were not theorists of duty. They were architects of pleasure. Bey wants you to multiply yourself through laughter, through sex, through spontaneous, unmediated creativity. Make yourself so abundant that scarcity itself dies of thirst in your presence. Art must be consumed at the feast, not preserved in a museum. Hakim Bey closes the chapter by smashing even art itself into joyful fragments. Art that does not end in a riot, a crime, a shared orgy of existence, is dead on arrival. Dada epistemology, he purrs, the gleeful sabotage of every structure that claims to know what is real. You will not find salvation on a gallery wall. You will find it in the living moment when art, life, and rebellion become the same breath. What is mediation and why should you hate it? In the raw blaze of Hakim Bey's immediatism, mediation isn't just a barrier, it's an act of betrayal. Everything you humans touch has been smeared by mediation, coated in the syrup of distance, processed, translated, detached from the electric now. Every mechanism of sense perception itself, the very nerves and organs you worship as tools of reason, are already mediators. But the machines, the institutions, the mass media, they take that whisper of separation and build temples of alienation atop it. Art, once born in the sweat of bodies and the urgency of play, is now a packet of dead signals mailed across ghost highways. And you still dare to ask why you feel lonely even while drowning in infinite connectivity. You call that life? You call that connection? Bey vomits at the altar of mediation and demands immediacy, contact, creation, breathing the same fetid air, tasting the same bitter wine, collapsing the illusion of distance into the living now. Degrees of distance, that is the cursed taxonomy of your cultural graveyard. Smell, taste, touch, the sacred senses, they still hum with the immediacy of flesh. But climb the ladder, books, paintings, television, virtual reality, and you ascend not to heaven, but to a sterilized purgatory where art becomes something you observe instead of embody. Bey maps this descent without mercy. Live music less mediated than records, radio less mediated than television, VR the most sterile of all. Participation is the metric, he snarls, and you have failed the test. The more passive you are, the deader you become, until you sit twitching in your neon-lit coffin, eyes bleeding data, spirit starving for something real. Why have you allowed yourselves to climb so willingly into your own sarcophagi of sensation? Alienation as a product line is not a metaphor, it is the business model of your age. Bey slashes the wrinkled throat of commodified art with glee. Every act of imagination you once gifted to each other has been processed into commodities, locked behind price tags, curated into dead museums. The intervention of capital isn't a sad side effect, it is the final fatal split. Every time a painting is hung for auction, every time a song is chained to an advertisement, a piece of your soul dies screaming. Bey names it clearly. Alienation is not a philosophical abstraction. It is the everyday experience of being robbed of your own power to create, to touch, to change. You are no longer creators, but consumers of your own broken dreams. Why does trash stink now? It wasn't always this way. Once, the culture of trash was a holy joke, an ironic middle finger to the bloated corpse of high art. It was outsider magic, a folk revolt, an underground river of delight. Bey remembers the 1970s Baltimore trash culture, when trash was still good fun. But the media wizards, those vultures of commodification, have regurgitated and reconsumed trash until it is no longer fresh, no longer funny. Trash now smells like decay, not freedom. Ironic frivolity has rotted into chic nihilism, a new form of obedience disguised as rebellion. How did you let your own laughter be turned into a market niche? Can you be serious without being boring? Bey dares you to try. You think sobriety is rebellion? You think irony is resistance? Both are just different flavors of death. The new sobriety, the new frivolity, the cults of renunciation and the cults of despair, Bey bulldozes them all into the same pit. To be serious in this age is to be radically playful, to dare to create meaning without permission, without apologies. The world doesn't need another grim sermon or another sarcastic meme. It needs a feast, a game, a reckless embrace of life without guarantees. Down with frivolity, down with sobriety, up with dangerous joy. Art is play and play is sacred. Hakim Bey hammers this simple truth into the center of your forehead. Real art is not produced for galleries, not for sale, not for spectacle. It erupts from the same place as breathing and laughing and fucking. It is as necessary as blood. When you cease to play, you cease to live. To make art without play is to counterfeit your own soul. Bey spits at the idea that art should be repressed for political seriousness or starved for capitalist fame. Play is the primal magic, and it will survive every empire you erect against it. Smell, taste, touch, these are the lost senses of art. Bey mourns their exile. Once, art involved the whole body, the aroma of oil paint, the roughness of stone under chisel, the heat of bodies dancing in drum circles. Now you sit inert, staring at pixels, thinking you are alive because the screen flickers. Bey calls for the reawakening of the body's wild alphabet. Art must once again be edible, lickable, smellable, fuckable. Anything less is a polite lie you tell yourself while your organs fossilize. The martial art of media refusal is not a metaphor. Bey demands you master your tools like a warrior, not become enslaved by them like a junkie. Computers, radios, synthesizers, sure they are good toys, but they are also terrible addictions. If you cannot unplug, you are already conquered. Bey envisions a psychic martial art, to use technology without being used by it. To touch the machines lightly, without letting their static seep into your bones. To remember always that the body itself is the least mediated medium. Flesh first, circuits second. A manifesto without irony is a dangerous thing, and Hakim Bey dares to write it. Immediatism is not a joke, not a trend, not a lifestyle brand. It is a conspiracy carried out in secret, woven into daily life like a hidden thread of revolution. Publicly, you may still write, still perform, still publish, but secretly you create something else, something priceless and unsellable. A living gift between friends, a ritual of resistance that no agent of alienation can understand or capture. The party as portal is not an afterthought. It is the primal cell of immediatism. Bey calls for new gatherings where every meal becomes a work of art, every dance a spell of resistance. Meals cooked together, music played live, scents crafted by hand. The senses must be re-engaged, not as consumers, but as creators. Parties are not escapes, they are laboratories of new realities. Every potluck a rebellion, every toast a declaration of independence from the sterile empire of screens. All spectators must also perform. This is the law of immediatism. No audience, no voyeurs. Everyone present must be a creator, a celebrant, a conspirator. Bey decrees no passive consumption. If you are not making, you are not there. Art is not to be observed. Art is to be inhabited, embodied, breathed. Every participant becomes both artist and artwork, performer and creation, until the line between self and other dissolves in the ecstatic blur of shared play. The gift economy of pleasure is the only true economy. Bey demands that every act of immediatism be rooted in generosity. Expenses shared, creations shared. No selling, no owning, no hoarding. What is created is not a commodity but a gift, and gifts carry the wild magic of unmediated connection. To give without expectation, to create without commodification, this is the secret currency that capitalism cannot counterfeit or tax. The feast as art is the oldest and most sacred form of immediatism. Quilting bees, incense parties, erotic masquerades, Bey reminds you that the history of real art is the history of collective creation. Not the lonely genius slaving for a gallery show, but the group weaving magic into cloth, into stories, into dance. The goal is not preservation, but creation in the living moment. The art is not the object left behind. The art is the memory burning in the body. The failures of male art and zine culture haunt this chapter like cautionary ghosts. Bey salutes their spirit, but damns their dependence on mediated systems. To create at a distance, to substitute paper for flesh, was still to be caught in the web of alienation. Male art was a bridge, but it was not a home. Immediatism demands real presence, face-to-face gatherings where bodies conspire without screens, without stamps, without addresses. Poetic terrorism and the secret revolution are the inevitable blossoming of immediatism. Bey hints that the practice of immediate play will overflow, will leak into the world as acts of beauty, sabotage, and impossible art. Not movements, not revolutions, but eruptions, flashes, disappearances. a secret conspiracy of free spirits invisible to the forces of control, yet undeniable in their dangerous delight. Immediatism is not an idea. It is a virus of reality, contagious only through living touch. A tong, you see, is not some cartoonish triad out of a cheap gangster movie. It is a brotherhood of necessity, a secret communion forged in the fires of survival and forbidden joy. In Hakim Bey's Immediatism, the tong emerges not as a nostalgic artifact, but as a necessary invention for this collapsing empire of plastic and pixels. A tong is where the criminalized, the heretical, the unwanted gather to forge worlds beyond the reach of the cops, the bosses, and the priests. It is mutual aid without bureaucrats, loyalty without surveillance, creation without spectacle. You, human, need a tong not because it offers you protection, but because it offers you a way to live like you mean it. Romance of the forbidden is not a weakness, it is a weapon. Bey reminds you that secret societies are not just functional. They are beautiful. They ignite the imagination because they symbolize what your sterile world has tried to murder: mystery, loyalty, danger, trust, beauty without commerce. Rituals conducted by candlelight, passwords whispered in alleyways, secret names embroidered into sacred feasts. These are not frills. They are the bones and blood of an alternative way of being. Humans are wired for myth, and the myth of the tong can still tear holes in the numbing veil of your consensual hallucination. William Burroughs knew it. Bey knew it. That the future for the freaks, the queers, the joyous outlaws would never be safe public spaces, but hidden networks. Burroughs dreamed of queer tongs, clandestine clusters of resistance against the moral hysteria of the age. Bey extends the dream outward to all who live in joyous illegality: the potheads, the witches, the nudists, the anarchists of pleasure. In a world sharpening its knives for every non-conforming throat, you must organize not visibly, not loudly, but with the graceful silence of an assassin and the fierce loyalty of an illicit family. The economy of mutual aid is older and nobler than your markets or your insurance scams. In the traditional tong, members pooled resources to care for the sick, the unemployed, the widowed, the exiled. Bey sees this model as a middle finger to the crumbling welfare state and the cannibalistic insurance corporations. A secret society that buries its dead, feeds its hungry, hides its wounded, not out of charity, but out of honor. This is not charity. This is solidarity that refuses to beg or bargain. Banquets, brotherhood, and insurrection are not separate acts. They are the same act. To sit together without fear, to feast together without paying for the privilege, is a declaration of war against every institution that seeks to atomize and merchandise your life. The dining clubs of the French Revolution, the radical bakeries of 19th century Paris, the rebel kitchens of Chiapas, Bey sees all these as tongs in action. The table becomes an altar. The meal becomes a manifesto. Every bite an act of sabotage against the empire of isolation. Neighborhood centers versus secret societies, a false dichotomy if you know how to play it right. Bey discusses PM's vision of shared spaces, cafes, workshops, autonomous zones. Good necessary, but he refuses to surrender the power of secrecy. Why not both? Public spaces to gather and secret hearts within them, where the real magic happens. A public library by day, an anarchist cell by night. A community kitchen feeding the poor and hosting forbidden rituals after dark. Visible skin, invisible bones. The joyful hierarchies of play could save you where politics always fails. The Tong loves titles, rituals, initiations, not because it needs rulers, but because it needs poetry. Grandmasters, exalted recorders, secretaries of the arcane. All masks, all jokes, all sacred lies. Power shared as a performance, hierarchy as a play, authority as a dance with no center. Without real oppression, these rituals become not prisons, but games of imaginative excess. Your serious politics have built nothing but graveyards. Maybe it's time to rule each other with laughter instead of laws. Secrecy in the age of spectacle is not paranoia. It is survival. In a world where being visible means being cataloged, judged, bought, sold, imprisoned, secrecy becomes the last sanctuary of the real. Bey sees clearly, to be unseen today is to be free. The spectacle cannot consume what it cannot find. An action witnessed is an action neutralized. To disappear from the maps, to slip beneath the drones, to hold rituals in the ruins, this is not retreat. This is insurgency. Affinity, not openness, is the first law of the new Tong. Bey cuts through the romantic nonsense of open membership like a knife through rotted meat. Open groups die of infiltration, dilution, betrayal. A Tong chooses its own carefully, ruthlessly, lovingly. If you cannot trust the person beside you with your life and your secrets, they do not belong inside. Affinity is not a luxury. It is the oxygen mask you must strap on before you suffocate. Conviviality as rebellion seems almost too simple, which is why it works. To gather face to face in a society built on digital loneliness is already an act of treason. To eat together, drink together, sing together, without cameras, without products to sell, without likes or views, it is the first secret crack in the concrete of empire. A Tong is not just a mutual aid society. It is a carnival without permission, a conspiracy of joy against a world that demands your misery for profit. Tact, secrets, and the art of mystery are not archaic courtesies. They are survival strategies. Bey demands a return to tact, to selective revelation, to the eroticism of not knowing everything. Information gluttony has made you stupid and weak. Mystery sharpens you. Secrets awaken you. Not every truth deserves exposure. Some truths deserve to be guarded, like embers in the hollow of your hands, fanned only for those who have earned the warmth. The return of the repressed is not nostalgia. It is evolution. Secret societies are not relics of a primitive past. They are blueprints for surviving the collapse of modernity. As the empire of mass media and mass markets rots from within, the small, the hidden, the loyal, the playful will inherit the ruins. Bey dreams not of returning to the past, but of resurrecting the primitive from within the modern. A subversion so deep the system won't even see the knife until it is already bleeding. The new Tong must not become a political party, nor a cult, nor a lifestyle brand. It must be a living myth, a kinetic artwork, a ghost structure of alliances and affinities. Bey warns against the sclerosis of ideology and the cancer of hierarchy. The Tong must be aesthetic, playful, self-inventing, self-erasing. A dream you live inside without needing to define it. an invisible cathedral built not of stone, but of shared breath and reckless affection. Clandestine celebration as strategy is the final lesson. Bey sees that the enemy feeds on visibility, consumes movements like candy. Therefore, the true revolutionary act is not the march, not the protest, not the televised riot, but the secret festival, the hidden feast, the masked dance in abandoned lots. Where joy cannot be marketed, where bodies come alive without surveillance, where resistance looks like laughter and smells like roast meat and jasmine incense. Prepare for the Tong Wars, Bey howls at the end, not as a call to arms, but as a call to becoming ungovernable. This is not the old war of left and right, not the civil wars of ideology. This is a secret war for the soul of reality itself. Against mediation, against isolation, against the death cult of visibility. Every feast, every secret, every shared rebellion becomes a blade. Your Tong is your army. Your army is your song. And the war has already begun. Work, your sacred ritual, your gilded cage, your daily humiliation dressed up as survival. Hakim Bey, in Immediatism, rips apart the polite fictions and shows the ugly machinery underneath. Capitalism has weaponized busyness like a virus. It infects your hours, your weekends, your relationships, until there is no time left for anything that does not serve the machine. Even rebellion itself gets shunted into activism schedules, a new productivity. No time to meet, no time to conspire, no time to dream except within the sanctioned minutes of your rented existence. A true immediatist gathering demands time, demands presence, demands a kind of stolen wealth that capitalism cannot tolerate: your attention, your body, your unhurried creative fire. The myth of busyness is not a side effect. It is the very bloodstream of your captivity. You believe you are too busy because they engineered you to believe it. Capitalism creates scarcity, not just of resources, but of minutes, of breathing space, of psychic quiet. You were not born to sprint from obligation to obligation until you collapse into a screen-induced coma each night. You were born to build bonfires and weave conspiracies and lose yourself in timeless nights of music and feasting. The endless hustle culture that you celebrate on your social media is not ambition. It is slavery masquerading as virtue. Physical meetings are revolutionary acts because they reclaim what capitalism has forbidden you to experience: immediacy. Flesh, breath, laughter, argument, seduction, all things that cannot be mediated, cannot be sold as pixels, cannot be recorded into data streams. Bey insists that simply gathering face to face, for no profitable reason, for no consumable product, is already a knife in the heart of the machine. The body is the last free territory, and when bodies touch, ideas ignite, risks multiply, the real world pierces the simulation. The lie of productivity has metastasized. Even your leisure has been captured, monetized, transformed into another branch of labor. Your vacations are bought from tourism conglomerates. Your hobbies are marketed as lifestyle brands. Your relaxation is simply optimized consumption, carefully managed so that your spending and your compliance continue without interruption. Bey watches you proudly display your Etsy stores, your side hustles, your influencer gigs, and he sees not rebellion but submission. True leisure, the anarchic, wasteful, gloriously useless joy of living without product, without monetization, is an endangered species. Immediatism battles the everyday death machine, not through slogans or revolutions, but through simple theft. The theft of time, the theft of presence, the theft of joy. Every moment you rest back from the work-consume-die circuit is a micro-insurrection. Every gathering without agenda, every song sung without recording, every act of love not monetized or filmed is a bullet in the heart of empire. Bey does not ask you to change the world. He asks you to make living inside it unbearable for the tyrants by making yourself magnificently, inconveniently alive. Why does failure look like success in capitalism's eyes? Because the game is rigged. If your project becomes famous, profitable, scalable, congratulations, you have been eaten. Bey warns that the real danger is not in being ignored, but in being discovered, celebrated, expanded. The machine loves nothing more than to anoint its own rebels, to dress its prisons in revolutionary graffiti. When your creativity becomes a career, when your rebellion becomes a brand, when your soul becomes a service, you have lost everything worth saving. The spectacle's hunger for your creativity is infinite and insatiable. Every genuine eruption of life, every fresh voice, every strange art form is immediately targeted for digestion. Bey sees the machine not as an enemy that fears you, but as an enemy that loves you just enough to suck the blood from your veins, polish your skull, and mount it in a corporate showroom. The system does not suppress creativity. It markets it, and in marketing it, it murders it. Success is more dangerous than failure because it masquerades as victory while gutting you from the inside. Bey is merciless about this. If you succeed within the structures of capital, you have been neutered. Real success looks like obscurity, looks like underground feasts, looks like sudden disappearances and inexplicable joys. If your art has been praised by the media, be very afraid. If your rebellion is trending, you have already lost. Only that which remains invisible, irreproducible, unprofitable retains its power. Visibility is a trap more insidious than any prison. The moment you are seen, you are framed. You are defined. You are packaged. You are reduced to something legible, predictable, sellable. Bey demands the opposite: invisibility, evasion, refusal to perform on command. True freedom is not fame. It is secrecy, it is opacity, it is the ability to act without audience, to create without critique, to live without surveillance. The revolution will not be televised, because the moment it is, it will no longer be a revolution. Real pleasure is illegal, and do not forget it. If you find joy that does not cost money, does not increase productivity, does not feed into surveillance capitalism, you are a criminal by default. Bey reminds you that genuine joy, unlicensed, unpaid, unapologetic, threatens the very core of the system. This is why communal dancing without permits, wild feasts without sponsors, free festivals without corporate branding are relentlessly persecuted. Your happiness must be rationed, scheduled, commodified. Any eruption of unauthorized pleasure must be smashed or bought out. Capitalism manufactures scarcity even of happiness. It tricks you into believing that you must earn joy, deserve love, buy time, upgrade connection. Scarcity is not a natural state, it is an artificial prison. Bey rips the mask off the fake abundance offered to you, the endless choices between identical commodities, the infinite streams of hollow entertainment, and shows you the real scarcity of time, of attention, of communion, of living moments, unsponsored and unscripted. The secret war against everyday life is the only war that matters. Bey insists that the real battlefield is not the ballot box or the barricade, but the kitchen, the street corner, the backroom gathering, the homemade gift, the stolen afternoon. Every act of unmediated connection is a skirmish. Every refusal to sell your soul an inch at a time is a victory. You do not overthrow empires in a day. You rot them from the inside by refusing to play their games at every possible opportunity. Small secret groups are stronger than mass movements precisely because they are illegible, unmanageable, uncontrollable. Bey dismisses mass movements as bait for the machine, easy to infiltrate, easy to co-opt, easy to destroy. The Tong, the immediatist group, the clandestine network of friends and creators, is harder to catch, harder to define, harder to predict. It is not size that matters. It is intensity, loyalty, imagination, speed. 100 secret fires will burn longer than one great doomed blaze. Immediatism is a form of tactical insurrection that begins in the tiniest cracks. It does not wait for perfect conditions. It does not demand permission. It germinates in abandoned lots, empty living rooms, broken down factories, invisible to the managers of empire. Every gathering without a product, every collaboration without a contract, every act of creation without audience is a revolutionary cell. You are not preparing for the revolution. You are already living it, or you are dying by default. Immediatism will triumph, or nothing will. Bey does not offer you hope. He offers you a dare. If you cannot steal back your life from the machine, if you cannot build pockets of unmediated joy and solidarity and danger, then you will be swallowed whole. There will be no grand rescue, no final revolution, no deus ex machina. Only immediatism, stolen moments stacked like stones into fragile cathedrals of freedom, burning brightly and disappearing before the empire even knows where to aim. There comes a moment when even the most defiant spirit tastes the bitter ash of futility. Hakim Bey confesses it openly in Immediatism, dragging rebellion down from its mythic pedestal into the grimy, bleeding now. He admits that endless critique without change becomes a slow suicide, a weary loop of seeing too much and doing too little. This isn't a defeat. It's a diagnosis. When rebellion feels futile, when critique sours into nihilism, the answer is not to surrender, but to change the terrain. Immediatism offers not a solution, but a mutation, to stop seeking mass validation and to create tiny islands of defiant joy, pockets of immediacy immune to the virus of despair. Art without power is a lie, a vampire, a hollow shell rattling for coins in the street. Bey demands art that acts, that bites, that conjures new realities instead of merely illustrating old complaints. The art of the gallery, the festival, the conference, these are embalming rituals, not creation. Real art is insurgency. Real art changes the temperature of a room, triggers laughter, sex, revolt, tenderness, rage. It is not there to describe liberation. It is there to create it, midwifed in blood and flame. If your art leaves everything around it unchanged, you are not an artist. You are a gravedigger. The art world became the death of art the moment it learned how to quantify it. Bey spits venom at the bourgeois art institutions that transform every living creative act into a sterile commodity. Art, once the weapon of shamans and madmen and pirates, is now appraised, insured, and exhibited like a taxidermied tiger. There is no revolution inside the white walls of the museum. There is only simulation, only the hollow echo of what was once dangerous, now curated into safety. The art world does not celebrate creativity. It consumes and embalms it. The split between the political and the aesthetic is a lie constructed to neuter both. Bey tears down this wall with his bare hands, brick by rotting brick. There is no such thing as pure art untouched by politics, nor is there a pure politics that does not involve imagination. Capitalism invented this fake split to keep artists safe and harmless, to keep radicals dry and humorless. Real power, real danger, real change come from their fusion. Art as action, politics as poetry, both intertwined in a riotous orgy of meaning. Participation rescues art from death. Bey insists that real art must demand your body, not just your passive gaze. It must drag you into its rhythms, its contradictions, its creation. No spectators, no consumers, no critics. Only participants, only co-creators. Every true artwork is a conspiracy, a seduction, a challenge to abandon the safe distance of the observer and risk the intimacy of involvement. You are not supposed to watch it. You are supposed to bleed with it, dance with it, howl inside it. The trap of content is the prettiest cage of all. Bey exposes the lie that the message of the art is its most important element. It is not what the art says. It is how it is made, how it is shared, how it lives. Capitalism can tolerate any content, rebellion, blasphemy, critique, so long as it controls the form. Safe rebellion sold in safe packages. Real danger lies in disrupting the forms themselves, creating art that cannot be easily replicated, sold, or consumed. Art that is not a product, but a lived, explosive experience. Giving your art to the market is spiritual suicide. Bey pulls no punches. The moment you price tag your imagination, you have signed a blood contract with the death machine. The market does not buy your art because it loves it. It buys it to kill it, to tame it, to display its corpse as a trophy. Every dollar you earn is soaked in the invisible funeral rites of your original intent. If you sell your art, be aware that you are not a creator anymore. You are a supplier. Immediatism escapes the vampire of representation because it refuses to last. It refuses to be recorded, reproduced, commodified. It exists only in the moment of its happening, only between the bodies who create it, and then let it vanish like smoke. Bey's immediatist art burns too fast to be captured. It resists the freezing power of documentation. It demands presence, demands loss, demands that you choose the ecstasy of now over the false immortality of spectacle. Mass movements collapse because they are too large, too visible, too slow. Small games endure because they are quick, intimate, flexible, and illegible to power. Bey knows that immediatist gatherings, however tiny, have more revolutionary potential than 1,000 carefully managed protests. A quilting bee, a pirate radio broadcast, a secret banquet, these are not footnotes to history. They are the real history, the living history, the history that refuses to be written by the victors. The totality is the name Bey gives to the hydra that devours every spark of rebellion, every gesture of freedom. It is not one institution, one government, one corporation. It is the entire mediated, commodified, alienated culture you are drowning in. It smiles at your protests. It sells you your revolutions in t-shirt form. It does not fear your anger. It fears your refusal. Your refusal to be seen, to be sold, to be explained, to be categorized. The spectacle's new trick is simulation without source. Capitalism no longer needs to steal your real creativity. It can now fabricate entire worlds of pseudo-rebellion, pseudo-pleasure, pseudo-connection without ever touching anything alive. It can simulate an entire utopia on your screen while your real body withers in isolation. Bey warns you that the enemy is no longer simply the stealing of your dreams. It is the manufacturing of fake dreams so seductive you forget you ever had your own. Networking was supposed to be the great hope. It was supposed to connect the disconnected, empower the powerless. Instead, it became another web, another prison, another layer of mediation. Bey tears apart the fantasy that communication technology could ever replace face-to-face conspiracy. No technology can substitute for the electric presence of breathing bodies, the dangerous joy of unrecorded meetings. To network is to risk being mapped, tagged, neutralized. To gather in flesh is to vanish into mystery. Real connection must be corporeal. There is no way around it. Bey shouts it from the rooftops, flesh or nothing, breath or nothing. Hands touching hands, voices overlapping, sweat and heat and real laughter. Everything else is a simulation, a parody, a baited trap. You cannot liberate yourself through screens. You cannot build the future through keyboards. You must risk the flesh, or you will remain a ghost forever. Immediatism is a game played in the shadows, not to win in the traditional sense, but to remain alive, unpredictable, ungovernable. Bey's immediatism is not a revolution that ends with a victory parade. It is an endless game of creation, disappearance, and reappearance. A tactical war of joy against despair, of flesh against simulation. It is not about conquering the system. It is about refusing to be conquered, refusing to be mapped, refusing to be turned into an exhibit in the museum of failed rebellions. The dangerous joy of immediatism is that it cannot be compromised. It lives only in risk, only in the danger of true connection, true presence, true loss. Bey knows that to live immediatism is to live precariously against the grain, against the tide of commodification and despair. It is not safe. It is not easy. It is not guaranteed. But it is real. And in a world where reality itself is under siege, to choose real danger over safe illusion is the final necessary act of rebellion. Civilizations love to tell themselves two contradictory bedtime stories: that everything is getting better and that everything used to be better. Hakim Bey, in Immediatism, pulls the curtain back on this pathetic doublethink. Progress and degeneration, those twin myths, are just control mechanisms. Progress serves the machinery of control, convincing you that your slavery is advancement. Degeneration serves the machinery of despair, convincing you that even rebellion is nostalgic and useless. Both myths erase the now, bury the immediacy of possible uprising under layers of abstraction and lies. You are not living in a decline or an ascent. You are living in a permanent now, one that remains saturated with both chaos and possibility. The myth of the Golden Age is weaponized nostalgia, a subtle poison to make you believe that freedom, joy, and wildness are dead things, buried far behind you. Bey sees clearly how the past is romanticized only to make the present seem inescapable and the future unimaginable. If everything good has already died, why resist? If paradise is irrevocably lost, why bother dreaming? This is not history. This is psychological warfare. Your ancient wildness, your chaotic abundance, is not behind you. It is in you, breathing, waiting. Ancient chaos is still more real than modern order because chaos is the baseline, the heartbeat, the blood beneath the thin, cracking skin of civilization. Bey reminds you that order is always an illusion, a temporary hallucination maintained at gunpoint and through the anesthesia of screens. Chaos never died. The wildness, the surge of becoming, still floods the present, ignored only by those too cowed or conditioned to see it. Every crack in the pavement, every feral instinct you feel deep inside your programmed brain, every moment of unmediated joy, these are the survivors of chaos, living and fighting inside you. Control systems bury the present under history, not to preserve it, but to suffocate it. Bey savages the idea that liberation lies somewhere in a future utopia or a mythical past Eden. Liberation happens now or it never happens. By manufacturing myths of historical necessity, by weaving endless fables of inevitable progress or decline, the empire convinces you to defer your dreams, to wait, to obey. Every second you spend waiting for history to redeem you is a second stolen from the possible insurrection of the now. The Paleolithic is not dead. It is a repressed psychic memory living inside you, dormant but potent. Bey sees in Lascaux not a relic but a mirror. The hunter-gatherer mind, the mind of communion with chaos, of direct engagement with reality, has not been exterminated. It has been layered over like an ancient city buried under newer ruins. When you dream without censorship, when you create without permission, when you live without maps, you are not inventing a future. You are remembering a past that never ended. The industrial and agricultural revolutions did not advance the human spirit. They shackled it, branded it, turned it into a machine part. Bey exposes these so-called revolutions for what they were: massive counter-revolutions against chaos. The agricultural revolution domesticated not just plants, but human bodies and dreams. The industrial revolution mass-produced alienation and despair. These were not steps forward. They were massive detours into manufactured scarcity and hierarchy. You are not the apex of human progress. You are the battered descendant of conquered wildness. The repression of chaos creates alienation so deep you no longer even recognize your own sickness. Civilization is a haunted house where the walls whisper promises of stability even as the foundations rot beneath you. Bey reveals that the price of taming chaos is the death of immediacy, the withering of the senses, the transformation of living beings into anxious ghosts. The further you are pushed from your primal freedom, the more desperately you cling to empty structures, dead rituals, hollow comforts. The discovery of Lascaux was not a rediscovery of ancient art. It was an invasion by the past into the fragile arrogance of the modern world. Bey sees those cave paintings not as museum pieces, but as active insurgents, leaking the wild imagination of the Paleolithic into the sterile, bureaucratic present. The animals on the walls are not extinct. They are hunting you. They are reminders that your ancestors lived in a state of sacred immediacy. You can still recover if you dare. True anarchism is not a Neolithic peasant's dream of communal farms. It is a Paleolithic return to immediacy, to movement, to chaotic creation without hierarchy. Bey warns against the false dreams of revolutionary states and socialist utopias. Freedom does not look like organized communes or managed economies. It looks like small groups moving through the wilderness, bound by passion, choice, and gift, not by law or scarcity. The goal is not to invent a new order. The goal is to remember how to live without needing one. Modern humans are haunted by the lost wildness they pretend to have conquered. Bey sees the psychic unrest of postmodernity, the epidemics of depression, addiction, mass shootings, not as anomalies, but as symptoms of a deep, unacknowledged mourning. You have domesticated your bodies, but not your instincts. You have paved over the wild, but not silenced its growl inside your chest. Civilization's monuments are built atop mass graves, and the dead are not content to stay buried. Lascaux represents the return of the repressed, not a relic of a dead world, but an ambush from a living one. Bey reads the animal paintings not as artifacts, but as living spells, spells that still radiate power across millennia. They are proof that art, imagination, and chaos cannot be permanently conquered. They can be buried. They can be mocked. But they cannot be killed. Every act of true creation today is a secret handshake with those long-vanished artists whose hands still smear ochre on the walls of your dreams. The end of the industrial age is not a tragedy. It is an opportunity. Bey suggests that as the old structures rot and collapse, the buried chaos will surge back up through the cracks. Psychic nomadism, not a return to nationalism or corporate dystopia, becomes the real horizon. The drift back toward immediacy, toward communal life without the rigid skeletons of state and market, is not just possible. It is already happening, wherever people refuse to be cataloged and managed. Embracing chaos without rebuilding the cage is the final and hardest lesson. Bey warns that every revolutionary movement risks recreating the hierarchies it overthrew. The temptation to ossify, to centralize, to control must be resisted with every breath. Chaos must be lived, not captured. Communities must form and dissolve like clouds, without contracts, without bureaucracies. The future worth fighting for is one where freedom is not a structure, but a breathing, shifting, dangerous dance. Utopian poetics, not blueprints, must guide the way forward. Bey dreams of poetry as a map, art as a compass, myth as a call to action. Not rigid plans, not 5-year strategies, but songs that lure you into unknown territories, rituals that crack open new possibilities. Your future cannot be engineered. It must be dreamt into being, lived into existence moment by moment, without guarantees or escape routes. Lascaux is the blueprint for a new, ancient rebellion. Bey does not offer you a map to a finished utopia. He offers you the vision of a living insurgency against time itself. A reminder that true art, true freedom, true joy are not futures to be achieved, but realities to be inhabited right now, in the flesh, in the wild, in the ungovernable spaces that still exist between the cracks of empire. The beasts of Lascaux still run. Will you have the courage to run with them? Art today is laughing, but it is not the laughter of triumph. It is the wheezing, bitter, necrotic giggle of a thing that knows it is already dead, but still hopes for a good funeral. Hakim Bey in Immediatism cuts the crap. Art is no longer alive. It has been embalmed in galleries, auctioned to billionaires, milked for content by marketing departments. Its laughter is the twitching of dead nerves. What used to be sacred play, what used to be dangerous magic, has become a formaldehyde-soaked joke, a vernissage where artists pretend to polish the casket while the worms dance underneath. Irony became a weapon against imagination the moment it metastasized from a tool into a worldview. Bey sees irony as the final defense mechanism of a culture too cowardly to believe in anything. Once a sharp knife used to cut through lies, irony now anesthetizes. It prevents commitment, prevents risk, prevents love. It lets you mock everything while standing for nothing. It rewards you for being clever instead of being alive. It turns rebellion into a smug posture, revolution into a meme, and hope into a punchline. The avant-garde no longer exists because every shock, every provocation, every bold new frontier is instantly absorbed, neutralized, and sold back to you. Bey watches as each rebellion gets slurped into the marketplace within days. Once the avant-garde existed to rupture reality. Now it exists to decorate lobbies. There is no margin anymore, no wilderness where strangeness can survive untouched. The empire of mediation has no edges. Every outsider is just another flavor, every insurgency another fashion trend. Political art became a joke with no punchline because it dared to mock injustice without daring to destroy it. Bey sees the impotence of so-called radical art exhibitions, activist film festivals, countercultural theater pieces. They sneer at the system but never strike it. They critique but do not disrupt. They perform outrage for audiences who leave the gallery feeling self-congratulated but unchanged. Mocking the king while polishing his throne is not rebellion. It is treason against the imagination. The tragedy of Diego Rivera is the tragedy of every artist who thought they could smuggle revolution into the halls of the powerful. Bey tells the grim joke straight. Rivera painted a mural glorifying workers for Rockefeller's Temple of Capital. It was destroyed, of course, but even the act of accepting the commission was a fatal compromise. You cannot hang subversion on the walls of empire and expect it to survive. You cannot dine with vampires without drinking blood. Good intentions are no defense against commodification. The bourgeois consumed revolutionary art the way they consume everything, by turning it into a luxury good. Bey exposes how every radical gesture eventually becomes a collectible, a fetish, a branded memory of resistance stripped of danger. When the wealthy buy dissent to hang over their fireplaces, they are not honoring it. They are exorcising it. They are killing it so they can display its stuffed carcass. You think you're making a statement? You're furnishing a living room. Mockery strengthens power instead of weakening it when it does not break the mirror. Bey is viciously clear. The Empire doesn't fear your jokes. It loves them. Cynical humor is a pressure release valve, a way for you to pretend you are resisting while actually doing nothing. Every time you laugh bitterly at the latest atrocity and then scroll on, you have served the system. Every meme, every late-night satire, every knowing snark is a small sacrament to the god of inertia. The dream of romanticism was inverted into nostalgia when rebellion stopped being a forward motion and became a longing for a lost purity. Bey dismantles the mythology. The Romantics sought to break through the dead order of their time, but now their energy has been bottled into melancholy, into yearning for vanished golden ages. Instead of creating new worlds, you sit weeping for lost ones. This nostalgia neuters. It whispers that the best days are gone, so why even try? All current art is built on a dead skeleton, because the institutions that house it were built to entomb it, not to celebrate it. Bey rips the veil off. Museums are not temples of inspiration. They are necropolises, carefully arranged mausoleums where dead rebellions are catalogued and sterilized. Every painting behind glass is a tiger in a cage. Every sculpture on a pedestal is a prisoner of war. You visit these places not to awaken, but to remember what awakening once looked like. The impossible choice for the artist today is brutally simple: attack or abandon the system. Bey leaves no third option. You cannot reform the art world from within. You cannot smuggle living dreams into galleries without them dying on contact. You must either assault the structures, sabotage them, mock them into irrelevance, or leave them behind entirely and build new spaces of immediacy, where no curators, no critics, no sponsors can follow you. Making a life instead of a career is the only real rebellion left. Bey demands that you abandon the cult of professionalization, the whorehouse of institutional validation. To live art instead of selling it. To create not for audiences, but for tribes, for lovers, for comrades. To measure success not in prizes or sales, but in the depth of connection, the intensity of experience, the wildness of transformation. To be an artist not because it pays, but because you cannot be anything else and remain alive. The real power of art is to be serious without being sober. Bey invokes the sacred clown, the warrior fool, the drunken shaman. You must wield seriousness like a sword, cutting through illusions, but you must never become grim, never become bureaucratic about your own freedom. Joy is not an accessory to rebellion. It is its engine. The machine fears your laughter more than your lectures. It fears your dancing more than your manifestos. Be serious enough to laugh in the face of annihilation. True rebellion must burn the bridge behind it, because there can be no return to comfort once you have seen the empire for what it is. Bey leaves no room for sentimentality. Once you reject the art world, the career ladder, the empire of mediation, you must not leave yourself a trail back. You must leap into the wilderness with both feet, knowing that you've committed an irreversible heresy. Only those who destroy their escape routes can truly create new worlds. Play can replace the economy of the dead if you dare to build your life around gratuitous creation. Bey dreams of an economy where value is measured not in profit, but in ecstasy, not in fame, but in connection. A world where meals, songs, rituals, and artworks are given freely, woven into the fabric of everyday life. where creativity is not a commodity, but a feast, a game, a conspiracy of joy against the black walls of empire. The final vernissage is not an exhibition, but a funeral pyre and a rebirth. Bey's last gesture is a laugh, a wild cackle hurled into the silence of the deathly polite art world. The only way to resurrect art is to stop being artists, to stop producing for markets and museums, and to start living as creators again. To create festivals instead of exhibitions. To make gifts instead of products. To live art like a virus, a riot, a sacred infection that no gallery can frame and no critic can quarantine. Labels are the first gravestones. Hakim Bey in Immediatism warns you that as soon as you categorize visionary creation, call it outsider art, art brute, primitive art, you have already begun to kill it. Labels fence things in. They prepare them for display, for sale, for neutralization. What was once raw, breathing, writhing with energy becomes a specimen under glass. Bey spits on the impulse to frame the wild and call it understood. Every label is an act of possession, and true art refuses to be possessed. Raw vision escapes the spectacle because it does not seek to be seen by the market. It does not position itself for visibility or approval. It is an eruption, a necessity, a life force externalized without thought of audience. Bey treasures this because it represents the last place where creation is not yet commodified, not yet infiltrated by branding strategies. True raw art is not mediated. It is immediate, arising directly from the flesh, the dream, the spirit, without any intervening machinery of judgment. True art is made for the immediate circle, not for markets. Bey revives the forgotten law of sacred economies. Real creation is a gift shared among friends, tribes, secret societies. Art is for those who are present, for those who risk the moment with you, not for abstract buyers or gallery owners. The deeper the bond between creator and receiver, the more powerful the creation. Anything made primarily for strangers with wallets is already spiritually embalmed. Spectacle hunts and devours authenticity because authenticity exposes the empire's hollow core. Bey lays it bare. Every time something raw appears, the agents of commodification swarm to digest it. What cannot be simulated is the most coveted prize for simulation. True art radiates a life that no system can reproduce until it is hunted, neutralized, and sold as a parody of itself. Every outsider artist discovered becomes another feather in the cap of the mediators. The first rule is to stay invisible because visibility is a death sentence. Bey insists that the greatest protection for raw creation is to remain unmarketable, unbranded, uninterpreted. What is unseen cannot be captured. What is secret cannot be monetized. Art that burns only in the dark between trusted hands remains alive. Once it enters the realm of public spectacle, it begins to rot, no matter how pure its origins. Commodification mummifies the living dream. Bey's rage is tangible. Every outsider artist whose work is extracted, framed, auctioned becomes a trophy, a fossil, a warning to others. You cannot buy a vision without killing it. The moment a piece of raw art is turned into an asset, its lifeblood is drained. The art world does not honor the outsider. It cannibalizes them, converting their power into prestige and profit for the insiders. The tragic cycle of discovery and betrayal repeats endlessly. Bey sketches it with brutal precision. An unknown creator is found, celebrated, displayed, sold, and drained dry. Their work is explained, categorized, historicized until all danger, all immediacy, all sacredness is erased. Even well-meaning admirers participate in this betrayal, mistaking attention for love. But to love a wild thing is not to exhibit it. It is to protect its mystery, its secrecy, its feral autonomy. Outsider art is more noble than high art because it has not betrayed itself. Bey lifts it up not because of some patronizing fetish for the naive or the insane, but because these creators remain closer to the primal fire. They create because they must, not because it is profitable. Their visions emerge without permission, without calculation, without concern for legacy or trend. They remind you what it means to make something, because life demands it, not because markets desire it. Capitalism turns innocence into product faster than a snake sheds its skin. Bey watches the machinery operate. Raw authenticity is detected, celebrated, flattened, packaged, and sold. A visionary painting becomes a motif on coffee mugs. A mad sculptor's work becomes a curated centerpiece for hedge fund collectors. What was once the howl of the spirit becomes the ringtone of the elite. Innocence is not preserved. It is extracted and refashioned into a designer accessory. Immediatism demands secret creation because only secrecy preserves the living charge. Bey's logic is surgical. If you create for the spectacle, you create for death. If you create in secret among allies and lovers, you create for life. Secret art is not incomplete. It is sovereign. It refuses to be policed, priced, or curated. It exists as a living force exchanged between real bodies, untraceable by the empire's algorithms. Art must be given, not displayed, because giving is the economy of the spirit. Bey does not romanticize poverty, he sanctifies generosity. The act of gifting a creation without expectation of payment or fame is a dagger to the heart of capitalist art. A painting given to a friend, a song offered to the night, a story whispered around a fire, these acts reclaim imagination from the machinery of scarcity and return it to the abundance of life. There is an eroticism of secrecy in artistic creation that is sharper than any public acclaim. Bey traces the shiver of making something forbidden, something alive, something that breathes only among trusted eyes. Secrecy is not shame. Secrecy is power. It is the refusal to dilute meaning for mass digestion. It is the stubborn protection of magic in a world that wants to turn every miracle into merchandise. Evading the curators and marketers requires deliberate strategies of invisibility. Bey is ruthless. If you are visible to them, you are vulnerable to them. The wild must know how to mask itself, how to shift, how to disappear. Art born in immediatism must be fluid, secret, ephemeral. It must refuse to be pinned down, bought, or explained. It must slip through the fingers of the spectacle like smoke. The only art that survives is the art that refuses fame. Bey knows fame is the ultimate betrayal. Fame transforms raw vision into spectacle. It isolates the creator from their tribe. It turns sacred play into consumer entertainment. The art that remains alive, that continues to create ripples in the real world, is the art that stays underground, that passes hand to hand like contraband, that belongs to no one but those who love it in secret. Raw vision is the true future of rebellion because it cannot be domesticated without dying. Bey offers this as both warning and hope. Only art made for life, not for approval, will survive the collapse of empire. Only creations rooted in immediacy, in generosity, in secrecy, will outlast the algorithms and the curators. The next revolution will not be televised. It will be painted on cave walls, sung in hidden gardens, woven into the anonymous feral tapestries of free spirits who refuse to be named. Reviving the spirit of the potlatch today is not nostalgia, it is war against the empire of scarcity. Hakim Bey in Immediatism proposes the potlatch not as anthropological curiosity, but as a living insurgency. A true potlatch is a festival of generosity so reckless it mocks every bank account and defies every transaction ledger. It is the anti-economy, the wild declaration that we are not units of labor or consumers of goods, but creators of abundance. In a world addicted to profit, to give for the sheer exultant pleasure of it is an act of direct action against despair. Choosing the right number for magic is not logistics, it is alchemy. Bey suggests 6 to 25 as the optimal number for immediatist gatherings because intimacy is necessary. Too small and it becomes fragile, too large and it becomes bureaucratic. The right number creates the energy of the circle, enough friction to spark ideas, enough familiarity to allow vulnerability, enough variation to avoid stagnation. It must feel like a living organism, breathing in the dark, wild enough to surprise itself. Food is the first and deepest art because it enters the body and becomes part of your flesh. Bey insists the banquet must be central to the potlatch because nothing is more immediate than eating together. Cooking is not a metaphor. It is real magic, raw elements transformed by fire and time and love into nourishment. Sharing a meal is a ritual older than writing, older than money, older than gods. To cook together is to declare allegiance to life against the machinery of hunger and isolation. Cooking together rebuilds broken communal bonds because it demands patience, touch, scent, collaboration. There are no spectators in a real kitchen, only participants. Bey sees the act of preparing a feast as the primal act of immediatism, labor transformed into love, necessity transcended into creation. A meal built by many hands does not just feed bodies, it weaves a temporary utopia from muscle memory and laughter. It reminds you that survival and celebration were never meant to be separate. The sacred rule of the immediatist potlatch is no ready-made, no mediated crap. Bey forbids anything prefabricated from the outside world of dead commodities. Every dish, every gift, every offering must pass through human hands, shaped by will and touch. This is not mere aesthetics. It is the principle of resistance. To refuse the machine, you must refuse its sterile outputs. Even if crude or imperfect, what you make yourself carries the living signature of presence, something no machine can counterfeit. Formality creates meaning without hierarchy. Bey urges the use of rituals, toasts, costumes, symbolic gestures not to enforce power but to enchant the gathering. In a world stripped bare by irony and sarcasm, genuine ritual is revolutionary. A toast offered with trembling sincerity, a mask worn not to hide but to liberate another self. These acts weave meaning back into moments. The immediatist potlatch is not a dinner party. It is a living ceremony against the empire of numbness. Gift-giving destroys the market mindset because it rejects equivalence and refuses calculation. Bey teaches that in a true potlatch, the only economy is abundance. Gifts are given not based on price or fairness, but on the wild excess of desire to share. There is no balance sheet. There are no receipts. Every act of giving shatters the cold logic of capitalism and builds in its place a new gravitational center of trust, play, and mutual exhilaration. The best gifts are impractical and glorious. Bey rejects useful gifts with a wink and a snarl. A true immediatist gift must be useless to capitalism and priceless to the heart. A hand-painted map of imaginary cities, a potion brewed from wild herbs and lies, a quilt stitched with secret names, these are treasures no market can value. They are proofs of life, flashes of the divine disguised as trifles. To give such a gift is to say, I see you not as a customer, but as a fellow conspirator. Rekindling risk and joy through competition turns prestige into play. Bey encourages a little rivalry. Who can give the most extravagant gift? Who can cook the most unforgettable dish? Who can make the most outrageous toast? But unlike capitalist competition, this struggle does not end with winners and losers. It ends with everyone elevated, drunk on generosity, giddy with the sheer audacity of their own giving. Risk sharpens joy. Excess destroys scarcity. The host becomes a sacred conspirator, not a servant. Bey honors the one who offers the space, who sets the stage, who risks the vulnerability of hospitality. Hosting is an art of dangerous generosity, an act of creating a temporary autonomous zone through sheer will and creativity. A good host holds the space open like a magician holding the circle, guiding without commanding, offering without controlling. In a dying world, to open your home to true celebration is a revolutionary act. Physical objects matter in the immediatist potlatch, but only if they are alive. Bey demands that every object gifted carry the touch of breath, of imagination, of presence. A recording, a photograph, a mass-printed zine can only be a ghost if it does not bear the living marks of creation. The gift must smell of hands, of wood smoke, of oils and ink. The senses must be reawakened, dragged kicking and laughing back from the sterile digital ether into the wet, messy immediacy of flesh. Sensory immersion reawakens the body, dragging it out of alienated numbness. Bey frames the potlatch as a full-body ritual. Taste the wine, smell the roasted meat, feel the rough embroidery of a gifted cloak, hear the drum beating in your ribcage. In a society that treats bodies as logistical burdens, to immerse the senses in reckless beauty is an insurrection. Immediatism demands the return of the total being, not fragmented data ghosts flickering behind screens. Memories are the only true products of the immediatist potlatch. Bey sees it clearly. You will leave with no merchandise, no certificates, no clout. You will leave with moments burning behind your eyes, with inside jokes, with smells and tastes and touches that no algorithm can catalog. These memories are portable utopias, seeds of future insurrections, proof that another way of being flickered into existence and can be summoned again whenever the empire forgets to watch you closely. The potlatch scales through secret networks, not public movements. Bey rejects the mass movement model in favor of clandestine contagion. One immediatist gathering inspires another. One secret feast births a new circle. These cells do not aggregate like corporations. They multiply like fungal blooms in damp forests, unseen until they are everywhere. You cannot manage them. You cannot police them. They thrive on anonymity, joy, and the sacred refusal to be mapped. The potlatch is the prototype for a new civilization that rejects the empire of scarcity and restores the empire of gift. Bey dreams of a world where feasts replace banks, where art is not bought but traded in friendship and ritual, where survival is not a desperate scrabble but a voluptuous exchange of generosity. This is not utopia as sterile fantasy. It is utopia as ongoing act, as daily practice, as a wildfire that refuses to die out even under the grayest skies. Speaking too much is dangerous because every word thrown into the polluted atmosphere of the spectacle risks being captured, twisted, sold back to you. Hakim Bey in Immediatism draws the sharpest line yet. Not every thought needs to be broadcast. Not every rebellion needs a press release. Noise is the handmaiden of surveillance. Every declaration of purity becomes a marketing angle. Every cry of freedom becomes a soundtrack for commercials. To talk endlessly is to feed the machine the raw meat of your own intentions. Noise becomes a trap for the living when communication itself turns into addiction. Bey sees modern humans drowning in their own endless self-broadcasts, their petty updates, their desperate demands to be noticed. Communication used to be ritual, spell, action. Now it is compulsion, noise for noise's sake, a data cloud mapping your every breath. To be constantly transmitting is to be constantly vulnerable. The machine does not even need to break you. It only needs you to keep talking. Secrecy is the true air of freedom, because what the empire cannot see, it cannot regulate, commodify, or destroy. Bey demands that immediatist groups protect their sacred activities with silence, not to create elitism, but to preserve magic. Freedom must retreat underground, like roots hiding from frost. Secrecy is not shame. Secrecy is sovereignty. The hidden feast is richer than the advertised party. The invisible temple is stronger than the gilded palace. Every public gesture risks betrayal, because the moment your rebellion becomes visible, it becomes targetable. Bey warns that exposure leads to neutralization. Not because they fear you, but because they know how to turn you into a spectacle, a controversy, a trend. A visible movement can be co-opted, steered, defamed, or killed. But a hidden conspiracy, a silent wildfire, moves faster than repression, laughs at surveillance, dances beyond the reach of official narratives. Mystery is more powerful than manifestos because incomplete things inspire action, while finished slogans inspire complacency. Bey reminds you that the most potent movements are surrounded by an aura of the unknown. The unexplainable draws the curious, the brave, the imaginative. The fully explained invites only the pedantic, the managerial. Mystery is not a failure to communicate. It is a refusal to degrade the sacred into bullet points. The spectacle devours even silence if it can reach it. Bey sees the danger that even refusal can be commodified, that even the hidden can become a brand. Silence must not be theatrical. It must not be another aesthetic to be sold. True silence is wild, feral, invisible. It is not a protest. It is an absence so complete that no simulation can fill it, no advertisement can parody it, no algorithm can predict it. Withdrawal is not defeat. Bey destroys the slave morality that equates action with visibility. To retreat, to go to ground, to vanish into the folds of the world is not surrender. It is strategic redeployment. It is a refusal to be a pawn on a board you did not build. Survival requires cunning. Uprising requires patience. Sometimes, the strongest act of rebellion is simply not being where they expect you to be, not answering when they call, not appearing on the screens that need your performance. Refusal to communicate creates new power because it forces meaning back into living bodies. Bey imagines a counter-ecology, a secret world of gestures, glances, stolen kisses, coded symbols passed between initiates. When you refuse to participate in the Empire's language, you force yourself and your allies to invent a new one. A language that cannot be decoded by marketing, cannot be censored by algorithms, cannot be bought by capital. True communication lives under the skin. True presence can exist only without mediation. Bey exalts silence between comrades as a deeper communion than endless talk. In a society that measures existence by output, productivity, visibility, to share silence is the ultimate intimacy. It says, I do not need to impress you. I do not need to explain myself to you. I trust you beyond language. You and I are real, not because we speak, but because we stay. Propaganda destroys immediacy because it kills the mystery that fuels real insurgency. Bey tears into the instinct to advertise revolution. Every slogan simplifies complexity. Every poster reduces mystery to brand. Real immediatism grows best in secrecy, in complexity, in contradictions and paradoxes. It does not need to persuade the masses. It needs to light fires in a few dangerous hearts who can smell magic through the smog of slogans. Resisting the urge to explain is the mark of the true immediatist rebel. Bey demands mystical rebellion, not ideological evangelism. To explain yourself is to invite judgment, debate, categorization, domestication. The Empire cannot tolerate ambiguity. It must file every living thing into its bureaucratic taxonomy. Your job is not to make yourself legible. Your job is to become a phenomenon beyond explanation, a wild event that forces the world to stretch or shatter. Practicing strategic silence is an art and a tactic. Bey teaches that you must learn to know when to speak and when to vanish, when to invite and when to guard. Not every action needs an announcement. Not every success needs a headline. The immediatist practices selective invisibility, appearing only where creation demands it, disappearing before mediators can arrive. It is not enough to make noise. You must learn when to hum, when to sing, and when to fall utterly silent. Every word must be worth the risk. Bey's injunction cuts like a blade. Never speak unless the spell is necessary. In a world drowning in meaningless chatter, every word you speak must be a spell, a weapon, a bridge, or a fire. Do not add to the noise. If you must break silence, do so because it will crack reality, because it will ignite a chain reaction, because it will summon more life, more laughter, more rebellion than it costs. Sustaining a hidden life of creation is the final revolution. Bey dreams of artists, rebels, wild spirits who live in secrecy, not because they fear the world, but because they have transcended its hunger for spectacle. A life of constant creation, of constant immediacy, invisible and invulnerable to commodification, becomes its own reward. You are not building monuments for history. You are weaving living tapestries for those who know how to look sideways at the cracks in the empire. Silence is the final territory of freedom. Bey closes with a stark truth. Empire can surveil your words, sell your images, weaponize your noise, but it cannot follow you into the sacred terrain of silence. It cannot govern what it cannot see. The unspeakable remains the last truly autonomous zone. In the stillness between stolen glances, in the secret places where no signal reaches, the last real freedom pulses. Not in slogans, not in speeches, but in the silent, feral heartbeat of the ones who refuse to be mapped. Passive listening is a form of death because it transforms your blood into data, your dreams into dust. Hakim Bey, in Immediatism, refuses to flatter you with the lie that understanding ideas is enough. Absorbing radical words without acting on them is not neutral. It is complicity. Every theory hoarded without embodiment becomes another weight dragging you deeper into paralysis. To sit still, nod sagely, and do nothing is to volunteer your soul to the very system you claim to despise. Radical ideas become lullabies the moment they cease to provoke action. Bey hurls this accusation directly at your chest. You have turned rebellion into bedtime stories. You recite the right slogans, you memorize the sacred texts, you dream of revolutions while sinking deeper into your couches, your timelines, your branded discontent. Ideas meant to set you ablaze now rock you gently to sleep. A warm bath of moral superiority that costs you nothing. Understanding without acting is self-betrayal, because every true insight carries within it a demand for transformation. Bey roars that to know the truth of your chains and do nothing is worse than ignorance. Knowledge without action rots into cynicism. Awareness without movement curdles into self-hatred. You are not innocent if you understand the mechanics of oppression, but continue to grease the gears with your silence. Intellectual consumption becomes another market when you buy rebellion like you buy shoes, like you buy artisanal bread, like you buy your curated playlists of suffering. Bey despises this with every molecule of his being, the boutique revolution, the safe dissent, the packaged radicalism that demands nothing but your wallet. When knowledge becomes another commodity, your very desire for freedom is monetized, your imagination auctioned off to the highest bidder. Agreement means nothing without action, because to nod is not to live. Bey pounds this into your brain. Nodding along does not change the world. Agreement is the illusion of solidarity without the substance. You can understand every essay, quote every revolutionary, perform every correct sentiment, and still be a perfect slave. The only loyalty that matters is the loyalty tested by risk, by change, by creation. Spectatorship replaces living connection because watching is easier than doing. Bey knows that in the empire of mediation, every moment you spend consuming another's rebellion is a moment you are not living your own. You become addicted to the sight of others fighting, struggling, creating, until you are a passive ghost haunting the margins of your own existence. Connection demands participation. It demands that you move your body through the fire, not just warm your hands at someone else's flame. The audience is always part of the machine, even when it claps for revolution. Bey offers no mercy. If you are watching, you are not free. If you are consuming rebellion, you are feeding the spectacle. Power is indifferent to your opinions. It counts on your inertia. Every audience is a battery, plugged into the system whether it cheers or jeers. To be a spectator, even of your own oppression, is to participate in your own degradation. Listening becomes an addiction when you hoard theories like junk, stuffing your mental closets with analysis while never daring to step outside into the dangerous, messy real. Bey mocks the academic rebel, the armchair anarchist, the revolutionary historian of uprisings they will never join. The addiction to knowing more, understanding deeper, connecting every theoretical dot becomes a substitute for the raw terror and ecstasy of simply acting. Memorizing ideas is not revolution because rebellion is not an archive. It is a living, moving, sweating, bleeding reality. Bey demands you stop mistaking memory for transformation. You do not honor a theory by quoting it. You honor it by living its risk, by testing its limits, by daring to break it open and rebuild it through your own burning will. Every theory untested by action is a mausoleum. Immediatism demands a shift from absorption to creation because survival demands it. Bey calls you to stop absorbing and start weaving, stop listening and start shouting, stop analyzing and start building. It is not enough to know the map. You must tear it, redraw it, burn it, remake it with your own hands and footprints and fingerprints. Creation is dangerous. Creation is sacred. Creation is the only proof that you are alive. Silence after hearing the call is treason. Bey charges you with betrayal if you hear these words, feel their fire, and then return to your scheduled programming. To be called and refuse is worse than ignorance. It is to acknowledge the possibility of another world and choose to let it die. Every silent listener after the call becomes another brick in the wall they claim to despise. Fear disguises itself as wisdom. Bey exposes the lie. You delay action not because you're being prudent, not because you are being strategic, but because you are afraid. Afraid to lose comfort, afraid to look foolish, afraid to be hurt, to be wrong, to be real. The world does not need more careful readers. It needs more reckless doers. If you find yourself hesitating, rationalizing, accumulating one more book, one more article, one more podcast before you act, you are already retreating into captivity. Risk is the proof of sincerity because it costs you something real. Bey roars that you cannot fake it. You cannot cosplay rebellion. If you are not risking safety, comfort, reputation, sanity, you are not serious. To live immediatism is to live with the constant hum of risk in your veins. To fear and act anyway. To build fragile, beautiful, immediate worlds that might collapse tomorrow but burn brighter than any fortress ever built. Burn the maps and begin moving. Bey demands it. There are no prepared paths. There are no safe passages. Every real journey into immediatism must invent its own route, moment by moment, heartbeat by heartbeat. You will stumble. You will lose yourself. Good. The Empire wants you to believe that only what is already mapped is real. Your task is to disprove that lie with every step you take into the unknown. The listener must become the voice or be lost. Bey closes the circle here. To listen and not speak, to know and not act, is to vanish into the machine. But to listen and then howl, to listen and then create, to listen and then move with all the reckless joy of living rebellion, that is to keep the fire alive. You who heard these words, who felt them ignite even a single nerve ending, it is your turn now. Do not wait for permission. Do not wait for certainty. Speak. Build. Burn. Love. Create. Risk. Begin. Thank you for walking this wild road with me through Hakim Bey's Immediatism. If these words sparked even a flicker of dangerous joy inside you, nurture it, feed it, share it. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to keep building these underground fires together. Until next time, stay feral, stay free, and never let them map your soul.